So I'm going to set this up based on my conversation. It's a 12-page document. What is my start number? What am I setting it to? The document's going to start on page what? Page 1. Starting on page 1. So that means I can start on a different page number. So I'm going to show you the difference between starting on page 1 versus starting on page 2 in a few minutes. Now the next thing that I want to show you is that there's an option right here. What does it say? So primary text frame, is it checked? No, by default it's not checked. What is primary text frame? Primary text frame is an auto text box. The software puts in auto text boxes for you. And you'll notice it's not checked. And it's better if it's not checked because the auto text box has issues. It always has. And I never use it. And neither should you. Okay? So I'm not going to explain why today, but maybe at some other point in time. And then here we have the ability to create columns. And once we create a column, we also have what's called a gutter. So documents 8.5 by 11 are too wide. It's too wide of a size to run a line of text across it. So if I have an 8.5 by 11 document, we should also discuss that when we work with text in a document that we hold at arm's length, a magazine, a book, a brochure, there are certain sizes and expectations that designers work with, rules that we work with for setting text in an appropriate way. The common dimensions for typography in a document that's held at arm's length is a range between 8 and 12 points. 8 and 12 points. That's a big range. What's the number right in the middle? 10. So 10 is right in the middle, and that's a very appropriate size, meaning that it's not too big, that it takes up a lot of space, and it's not too small where it makes it difficult to read. So usually when you set text, I advise students to set text at 10 points. Now with that being said, if I was working in 10 points and I wrote a line of text all the way across a document like this. Now you might do this for your papers that you're turning in for your assignments in college. But from a design standpoint, this is actually really bad. So that line indicates a line of text. So what happens is that you create a wall-like effect, a wall of text. And it creates a psychological effect in the user's mind. It basically looks like a lot of information. And it's not approachable. In other words, you look at it and you go, oh, that's a lot of work. I don't want to read that. Does that make sense? So an 8.5 by 11 document, if I wrote text all the way across the margin, I basically am producing a document that is rendering it psychologically illegible. So to make it legible, we break the text into smaller segments. Those smaller segments are columns. So if I take this document and I create a column create a gutter down the center and create two columns, now the line length, the distance your eye has to travel, is more logical. It's more accessible. It's more acceptable. It doesn't look like a lot of work. So by breaking my information into columns, I'm actually making it more efficient. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to increase my column count. Now for 10-point text, the appropriate number of columns is anywhere between 2 to 4 columns. 2 and 3 being the best. 4 columns, it starts to become very narrow, and it's going to break the text aggressively. So I'm going to stick to 2. Now the next variable that I have is the gutter, which is the space between the columns. So this is how much negative space there is between the columns. And you can change this to a different unit of measurement. I'm going to leave mine at 1/8 of an inch. Here we have the units for margins. So this is the optical padding. And how does it describe it? What does it say right there? Top, bottom. That's pretty straightforward. And then what does it say here? And outside. Now what does that mean? Inside and outside. What does that mean? So we'll come back to that in a second. And then we have something called bleed, which we've discussed in the past. And the bleed measurement is 1/8 of an inch, or 0.125 all the way around the document. And then for now, you can ignore the slug. I talk about that in other classes, not in this class. Just leave it at 0. All right, so let's recap. I have an 8.5 by 11 document. It's set up in portrait. I have facing pages. It's 12 pages long. My start page is page what? Page 1. It's 2 columns with an 1/8 inch gutter and margin set at a 1/2 inch all the way around and a bleed at 1/8 of an inch. Let me hit create. Boom. Okay, so here's my page 1. You'll notice that page 1 is isolated. It's on its own. When I click on the next page, page 2, so look, if I click on these pages, it takes me to that page. So this is how I manage my document. I can jump to the page by clicking on the page number over here on the right. So it's sort of my user interface for jumping from page to page. Okay, so let's evaluate this. Here's the bleed. It's this red line. And you'll notice it's running around the document. So that's my reminder that any graphical element that goes to the edge actually goes beyond the edge to the bleed. These are my margins. These are my columns. There are actually 3 gutters in the document right now. There's a gutter right here. There's a gutter right here. And this is actually a gutter as well. This gutter is driven by the gutter variable. What drives this gutter? The margins. Which margin? Inside. So this is the inside variable, and this is the outside variable. So inside, outside. Make sense? David, are you still cracking jokes back there? No. Okay, I hope not. Is he cracking jokes still?
I wasn't even listening. Was there something funny I should have heard?
I don't know. All right, so once again, we just reviewed how these settings ended up constructing my document. Now, I'm going to do this one more time.
How did you get the true?
So that's the facing pages button. Make sure that that's activated when you make the document. So right here, I'm making a new document. There's the facing feature right there.